Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Development's fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Karnoff, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to the February Room. Today I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Jessica Haydahl. She's a professional photographer with a lot of her work being published in multiple fly fishing magazines. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jessica.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I've stalked you on Instagram, and your photography is insane. You tend to capture the action shots so beautifully, and a lot of those are obviously the fishing world. And I imagine that you might have some, before we get into who you are, I'd like to hear a fishing story.
Yeah. Well, the first one that comes to mind would be my very first time fishing. I actually made a short film about it that's I won the Amateur Fly Film Festival for Rio, and it's in the IF4 right now in the intermission. I know that the movie IF4 isn't traveling right now, but due to COVID, but you can see the film there, and it's about fishing with my dad in Norway when I was 3 years old. And so it's just always something that's really stuck in my brain, because I never thought that, when I started fishing at the age of 3, we were ice fishing, and it was really cold and we didn't catch anything. I just never thought that, however many years later, I would be in the fishing industry, and, my whole life would basically be changed and rotate around the fishing industry. So it's always just kind of stuck out in my brain. My dad's Norwegian, and he is awesome, and I was 3, my sister was 4, and we flew to Norway with him, and we went out onto this big fjord, and it was freezing, and I remember I threw my gloves off, and he caught some sort of a little eel kind of worm thing. It was not successful, but it was just a really cool experience, and I remember it so vividly. Probably because we also took some photos of it. It's the most memorable fishing story that basically launches my life. The way I look at it, it just launches me forward into the fishing industry, and having a career now specializing in the sports fishing industry as a photographer.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think one of my most early experiences was actually ice fishing in northern Wisconsin with my uncle. And luckily, it was just kind of, I remember thinking it was such an odd sport, because we would just put the flags out and sit inside the cabin and just kind of do this waiting chess game, and we all got to choose which hole was ours. And so with my 2 sisters, and as soon as there was a flag up, we did it.
Which is awesome. And it's funny because I do go on quite a few, so I would say 95% of my work is in the conventional tackle world of the sports fishing industry. Most of the major companies have more funding to pay for commercial shoots for the commercial side, or for the conventional tackle side, or whether that's saltwater, bass fishing, walleye. So the fly fishing section of what I do in my industry is probably about 5% of my work is more focused on fly fishing. Which I tend to fly fish more myself, but it's just interesting that most people's first experiences fishing are generally conventional, because it's more accessible, it's cheaper, and
probably a lot more success.
A lot more success a lot of the time, and so it's funny because I do photograph a lot of ice fishing now. I get sent to this year I got sent to South Dakota right before COVID kind of shut things down. And last year I got sent to way up in northern Ontario. It was so cold. And it's funny because they have huts and all these little flags, and I kept thinking, I was like, well, we didn't have that when I was 3 when we went ice fishing in Norway. It was so cold, and And I didn't know we could have like little flags and huts and heaters. And let's see, we had an igloo kind of a vehicle this year that had big skids on it that was heated that we could keep all our equipment in for the photo shoot. And so I think as time has gone on, it's become a little bit more luxurious than when I first originally remembered ice fishing. So, yeah.
Times have changed from when you were 3 years old.
Can
So,
you believe that?
so how did you get into photography, and especially kind of the outdoor photography?
Yeah, so basically, I've always been a very creative person. Drawing, whether we're making things. My mother is I would call her an artist. She paints. She's a beautiful painter. My mom is also, she was an English major and graduated first in her university class. Like she's very good with words and writing stories. And so I didn't get that aspect, unfortunately, but the artistic kind of side kind of I think went my direction in terms of just being very unable to focus on regular studies, always just drawing. Now, I was not a great drawer, cartoonist or whatever. I was not great, but that's all I would do. And so I remember that I started going on more like little trips with one of my best friends. I grew up with a neighborhood boy across the street from me, and the two of us would do everything together and go everywhere. And I started going on a lot of little trips with his family over the summers in between, my sports and just anything that I was doing regularly. And so I started taking a point and shoot camera with me, and we're talking about I was maybe about 7, 8, maybe. And my mom would then pay for development of the film, or my mom and dad would pay to develop my film when I got home. And it was just like, it was pretty horrible. She would look at the photos and she's like, what were you taking a photo of? And I'm like, the light was coming through the cloud and it was hitting this barn and it just looked so pretty. But I was using like a cheap disposable, like point and shoot camera. So right away, I was never going to be able to achieve what I was visually seeing through my eyes. And so as I got a bit older, and I got into high school, I finally had an opportunity to take a photography course. And my mom had a 1974 Minolta SR or something like that, film camera. And she had this film camera for years, and she always took great photos with it. And so finally, when I got into high school, she said, okay, you can use this camera if you learn how to use it correctly, and then we'll pay for development of your film. So as soon as I got into high school and I learned how to use a darkroom, and I learned how to take photos and how to use the camera, how to change my shutter speed, how to change my f-stop, things changed right away. And so anyways, very long story short, I just became obsessed with it. And I was always, you could find me in the darkroom if I was not playing sports, because I played high performance hockey. If I was not, at the rink or training, I was photographing. And then I ended up, my dad built me a darkroom at my parents' house in a little,
Wow.
Shed out back. So it just stuck with me. It just stuck. The passion for it, the mechanical feeling and the mechanical sense you get, the tactile feel of a camera. I think there's something to that. And then as I progressed, I went to university. I got a business degree because I was playing hockey in the US. And I didn't know what I wanted to do after I graduated. So why not go back and do more school, right? So I did a 2-year professional photo imaging diploma program in Vancouver, Canada. And after that, it launched my career into being a professional full-time photographer. I did a practicum with the Vancouver Canucks. So I shot in the NHL, and I ended up leading to full-time work with the NHL and Getty Images right out of the gate. Like my career just got launched. And that is how kind of the sports action side of it kind of fell into my path. And the one thing about NHL players is they really love to fish, most of them. And so basically I got asked, I was assisting for the head photographer, and I was shooting at the arena and getting paid to do that. And he asked if I would be interested in covering a conventional salmon fishing derby up in northern British Columbia at an island called Haydahl. It's an incredible place. It's the most northern island you can go to, and it is named after the Haida people that are, native to the island there. And so I got sent up there to, and it's where humpback whales, killer whales, bald eagles. I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere. You fly in a helicopter, and so I was like, yes, I will do that, no problem. And so they sent me up there, and I grew up boating my whole life, and my dad was a tugboat captain for 47 years. So I grew up on the ocean, and so being on the ocean and photographing ended up just coming together in my life somehow super quickly. And here we are, 14, 15 years later. And I actually still shoot for that salmon lodge. This is the first year I won't be doing it because of COVID. But yeah, it's just, it's stuck. And then next thing you know, it just launched my career in the fishing industry. But I do like to say that yes, I specialize in the sports fishing industry, but I am a photographer from the get-go, so that I'm not a fishing photographer in terms of, I classify myself as specializing in it, but I feel like I'm a very well-rounded photographer because I've shot everything from weddings, engagement photos, real estate. If you want to be a professional photographer, you really do need to just start and then specialize as you become as you have more experience in it, and as you have more years behind you, and then you can slowly start to specialize in the industry you want to be in. And that's what I really recommend to people.
Do you feel that you've been wanting to specialize in more of the outdoor fishing industry? Is that kind of like where you want your specialty to be in?
Yeah, so about, I would say since 2012 is when I started to specialize in the fishing world. I started getting sent to Panama to shoot marlin fishing because the salmon lodge I worked for opened a marlin connection. And then that right away launched me into the magazine world. So I contribute to a massive variety of conventional tackle magazines, and then also I contribute to fly fishing magazines too. And so, that specialization started to take place around 2012 is when I really started to cut out all my other work and really just be able to focus and make make an income directly off of just sports fishing and not having to shoot as many weddings. And then as of time has gone on, I basically maybe shoot one wedding every 3-4 years if it's someone I know.
Do you have in a moment when you were doing a fishing shoot where you're like, this is the best gig ever?
I was shooting all this salmon stuff back in, I think, 2007, 2008 is when it really started. And I actually wanted to stay shooting NHL stuff. I mean, that was like my dream. I was a hockey player. I played the highest level I could as a female outside of the Olympics. So that was my life for so long that when school ended, I was like, oh wait, I'm a woman in sports, so I'm not going to make millions. And it's awful. It's terrible to know that you train your whole life just as hard as your male counterparts, but there is no avenue for you after, or there's very few avenues for women after. And so, it kind of was a stark realization when I was ending school. So getting to shoot in the NHL was my dream. I mean, shooting that editorial kind of style and photographing sports. And I kind of migrated and I shot NBA, I've CFL, and then I've shot some of our, not Major League Baseball in Canada, but our farm league team. So I was in the sports world. I shot soccer, MLS soccer, the professional league, and I was shooting all this editorial stuff. I was uploading to Getty, but honestly, the money and the amount of photographers in that there's a lot of photographers. The market is really incredibly saturated, and there's not a lot of money in it. And newspapers, unfortunately, are slowly dying. So it was kind of like that career choice was not going to maybe be the best idea. So I was shooting everything and anything, but I was spending my whole summer shooting this for the Salmon Lodge up in northern BC. Now they ended up hiring me. I created a photo program, and I spent the whole summers up there driving my own boats around, chasing down people with big salmon, releasing them, and just photographing whales and just like the coolest stuff. And so they eventually sent me to Panama in 2011. And I remember when I first saw my first marlin, and it was the very first call we got. I was out there as a chase boat, which never happens. For those of you who are listening, who either fly fish for marlin or who have gone conventionally fishing for marlin, most of the people know you are very far offshore and you're not around a lot of boats when you're fishing, unless you're on a reef or something. You're usually way away from everybody. So we were chasing. We had this one boat with clients on it, and they just said to us, "Stay close by. We'll radio if you hook. We'll radio you if we hook into a fish," because they knew we needed content. And so I remember we got the radio call. We cruised over to them, and this thing exploded out of the water, and it was like a dinosaur. And I just remember it so vividly. And here I am with a big 300 millimeter lens, bracing myself, like legs up on the gunnel, like pushing my back into the back of the seat. If you're fly fishing or conventionally hooked into like a billfish, your stand-up tackle, and you're kind of pushing yourself against the seat with your rod and reel, trying to hold yourself there. So I was doing that with my camera. I'm like, if it works for fishing, it's got to work for me, right? So I'm like pushed. I'm basically created my body into like the biggest tripod possible, because we were just getting tossed in the boat, and this thing erupts from the ocean way in the air. And if you've never seen a marlin jump or a sailfish as well, it's spectacular. So here I am, like just spraying. So I call it spray and pray, when you just hold your finger on the trigger button and you just hope to God you're getting the image. And so I have like a shot of the fish's bill, then I have a shot of the water, then I have a shot of the air, because remember the boat's also going up and down, and you're just like, when you're shooting through a 300 mil lens, it's like you're looking through a scope of a gun, and you're attempting to watch your target while you're moving and while the fish is moving. And so anyways, this just was like, it was so fast. It was just happening so fast. And then the captain on the other boat radioed us in again. And he was like, okay, back in closer. We've got him. And this doesn't happen very often either, because most captains, you don't know where the fish is going, and the fish could just take off and head another direction. It's very unpredictable. But this captain was like, okay, we've got the fish in close. We've almost got the leader. You can back in more. So we backed in more. I lined it up, and this fish exploded perfectly right in front of my lens, and I just hit the button, and I ended up shooting the best shots I've ever gotten in my entire fishing career, as far as I'm concerned, because this never happens. You're never on a chase boat. You never really have an opportunity to shoot that perspective from another boat and to be able to get so close. And so we got these images. The fish got released. The owner of the company's on the boat with me, and he jumps down. He's like, "Did you get it?" And we're looking at the back of my camera, and both of us just stood there like, "Oh my gosh, I can't." You imagine, you can see the eyeballs looking at me from this fish. And crazy enough, the captain of the other boat ended up becoming my husband years later. So,
No way.
it was just so we were in Panama. We were off the Darien jungle in Panama, and my husband's from Texas, and he was running a private marlin fishing operation. It just happened to line up that boat was out there. I didn't know him. I'd never met those people on the boat or anything. And so that image ended up, there's a series of images of that fish perfectly in frame, eyeballs looking straight at me. And it made 2 covers of a magazine, and then the image got ran a ton more. But it just... it was like that moment. I was like, oh, I think there's a career in this. I think there's a career in sticking with the sports fishing industry. There's got to be. And so, and I attribute all my work I did with the NHL, with all the sporting events I did, that quick, like, spray and pray, and like quickly having to react. You don't have time to set the shot up. You're just going. And I think that's what made me successful shooting that billfish kind of stuff. And I don't get to shoot that much billfish anymore, just because I'm now living in landlocked Montana. And I still go on shoots for companies to shoot that offshore kind of stuff, but I shoot a lot of walleye and bass, and then fly fishing, stuff. So I'm more on the commercial product side of it now, which is great because it's super interesting and fun. But I think I attribute a lot to having that sporting background, allowing me to be successful as a photographer in this part of the industry.
I know that you said, talking about kind of like how the sporting, that your whole life was dedicated to this sport and then it kind of timed out for you just because being a female. Do you ever feel that being kind of in the outdoor industry, being a female outdoor photographer, do you feel that it's hard being a female in that industry?
Yeah, I mean, there have been some barriers. I've definitely ran into situations where people are like, it's kind of a boys' trip, and I don't get invited to go photograph like bluefin tuna or something because they've decided it's a boys' trip. Where I like to do the things the boys like to do, so I want to go on those trips.
Yeah.
But I am the only full-time commercial fishing photographer in the industry.
Wow.
There is another girl, Jess, same name, Jess. She shoots more on the editorial fly fishing side. But I am, as far as I know, if there are any other females out there shooting full-time commercial work, 100% of your work is in the fishing side of the industry, awesome. Hit me up. Let me know, because I'd love to chat more with people who I have more in common with in that regard. And so really in the fishing side, there's like just two of us, and Jess is in the fly fishing side, and I'm all in the conventional, and then some in the fly. And that's it. And I think there's a benefit to that in some regards. I think that when I get hired to do shoots, a lot of the time I'm on someone's boat all day, and it's just me, and I'm shooting 95% males. I don't get to shoot females in the industry as much, but I do a lot of work with my really good friend Captain Monique Newman, down in Venice, Louisiana. And I shoot for her company, Journey South Outfitters, her and her husband's company. And they're awesome. They do fly and conventional, and they're just awesome people. And a lot of companies and brands work with them. So I go shoot for the companies and brands with them down in Venice. And we've done a ton of magazine spreads with that and everything. And so anyways, I think though some of the benefits are when I am working with guys, I think doing kind of photo shoots, I feel like people get pretty comfortable pretty quickly. I think that is a benefit maybe of being a female in the industry. And I guess I'm a little biased when it comes to that, because I think, I try to take like a joking kind of fun approach to our photo shoots, and generally can mesh with a lot of the guys really easily. But at times I have to be like, okay, boys, we're not here to fish all the time. Just remember who's footing your bill.
Yeah.
The commercial company's paying for it. So you kind of have to listen to me for a second. So sometimes I have to, get out there and get on them in terms of them listening to me. It's because boys, when you put fishing rods in their hand, all of a sudden they forget that they're there on someone else's dime, paying for like a trip in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. So
Do you ever feel like you have more to prove though? Like, because sometimes, like you said, they're like, oh, this is a boys' fishing trip. And you're like, hey, let me just show you what I'm all about.
well, it's not necessarily the companies who are hiring me that I feel like I think I proved myself. I've been in the industry long enough, and I've been published and sending in editorial work
Yeah.
enough, photo editorial work. I think at this point, like I feel like I have, I do think that people know who I am, because again, I'm the only female out there. I have, as I had told you
Yeah.
before we started recording, I am the only Jessica Haydahl in the world. So like I think like that helps. Like people have maybe heard of me, and I'm not trying to make myself sound like super
No.
important here, because in the grand scheme of things, it's just fishing photography. But I think that where I do find that it's where it can happen is when I go on photo shoots, and maybe I'm photographing like the top bass fisherman or something, and they've never heard of me. They don't know who I am. I don't like go and follow the FW circuit or the Bass Pro circuit or anything like I've been to Bassmasters, I've shot there, but those guys don't know who I am. And quite frankly, I don't really know who they are, even though they might be like the top bass. But that's great, and I'm super happy. But what I ask is people just trust that I know what I'm doing, and I trust you as a bass fisherman to know what you're doing. So there's definitely been some pushback, but you know what gets them is you just have to show them so usually the photo shoots are a couple days. Usually after we're done the shoot, we wrap for the day. Generally, we all go for dinner. And then you know what I do is I get my computer out. I just show them some images. I just have to show them a couple images. And they're like, oh, man, well, you know what we could do tomorrow? We can do this, this, and this. And like they get like so excited.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. And it makes me excited because then if I can work with someone who wants to collaborate on images, and again, they're the professional in their section of the industry. So if I'm shooting, say, spay fishing, the person who's doing it is generally going to be more knowledge than I am, or way more have more knowledge and more skill than I have. So for them to tell me, like, I'll say, hey, this would be really cool if I could shoot into the sun and you could rip your spay line right past my lens. Can you do that? Would this be something you would do? And they would say, yeah, for sure. Let's do this. And they'll do it. And that's the thing, is I have to trust the people that I'm working with, that they are the professionals in their industry. They know what they're doing. They'll also let me know if like, yeah, Jess, we wouldn't hold the fish like that, or we wouldn't like, I remember I have actually convinced a couple bass guys to lip their bass fish or release them by bellying them, like holding them on the belly and releasing them. And they don't do that. And I said, just like try for a second. I managed to convince them, and we ended up getting some like really cool, just the fish just above the water and a reflection of the fish perfectly in the water, and the guy just holding it, just cradling the fish by the belly like we would do with a trout. And after he saw it, he's like, oh damn, I've never seen this in the bass world. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a trout thing, but I'm like, it still looks cool. And so I know where to push it and where to back off, and also just like ask like people can continually, is this something you would do, or would you cast this way, or would you tie this bait on perfectly like this? And so I think it's a collaboration, and that's what really makes this kind of photography really successful in the end.
Well, and don't they normally just kind of, with bass fishing, they just kind of grab them by the lip and then just fling them in the air and drop them back in the water?
Fling them in the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most of the time I have them laying on their sides, grabbing the lip, and I just need that one motion. It's really hard as a photographer to track from the water. Like, so I have a wide angle lens. I'm standing in front of the guy, and he's got the fish at just below the surface of the water. And as he lifts it up and flings it into the boat, think of the motion that I have to do to attempt to keep my focus point on that fish as it swings past me.
Yes.
It's very hard. So bass are a very hardy fish. So certain fish you can take your time with, and you can stage things a little bit more. I hate to say stage because it's not like we're modeling the fish or posing them, but it's like, do the lift from the water up 3 times, put it in the water, lift it up, swing it past me 3 times. So you have to break things up into certain sections to kind of get some of these shots. Sometimes when it comes to marlin fishing, you're doing whatever that marlin wants you to do. That's basically the bottom line. I don't photograph marlin out of the water. I don't want to be a part of anybody pulling a fish out of the water with it when it comes to billfish.
Why is that?
Because it's harmful on the fish. So unless you're going to harvest a billfish, you have no right to take it out of the water, as far as I'm concerned. In Florida, it's against the law. If you want to keep your fish and harvest it, you can then pull it out of the water. But it's against the law in Florida to actually pull your fish out of the water. As you pull it out of the water to photograph it, you're scraping up the side of it, so you can actually see billfish that have been harmed that way. Also, billfish are like tuna. They continually need to be moving to have water flowing through them for them to breathe. It's not like a bass or a trout that we cradle it in the net in the water and we try to keep it healthy in that regard. Billfish need to have water flowing through their system to survive. I think it's in the pelagic species of fish need that. So there are many places in the world that it's against the law to harvest marlin and harvest sailfish. I have no problem with you harvesting it if you're harvesting it for food. If you're doing it for record, that's your own choice.
Yeah.
But there are very few people who also can pull a 5, 6, or 800-pound marlin out of the water
Yes.
for a photo.
Yes.
And if it jumps in the boat, you better be jumping out of the boat to protect yourself so you don't get hurt. I have been on boats where they have harvest fish before. And again, like that's not up to me. That's their personal preference.
Sure.
But if I'm down in Florida photographing, I'm not a part of any kind of harvesting. What we can do, which is really cool, is I get the mate will be leaning over the boat, generally always holding the bill of the fish, and the captain has the boat in gear, and they do that so they can get the water. Sometimes you need to give these fish a bit of a break, so you get the water flowing through their gills, and the mate is leaning over the side of the gunnel, down in with his hand right above the surface of the water, holding the bill. And if it's a sailfish, a lot of the time you'll have a second person holding their sail up, so you can get a beautiful spread of the sail, and that way you're still keeping the fish getting water through its gills, and keeping it safe, and just giving it the best fighting chance to survive after you've released it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the proper protocol in Florida too. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily follow that, but if you have any questions or information, the Billfish Foundation is always an awesome place to look.
I love it that you actually have all this knowledge because, I mean, as a photographer, you're also having to be in the know of what are the rules, what is the protocol, and what's the best safety measures for these fish. So I think it's actually
Yeah.
pretty incredible that you also take the time to understand what's best as a outdoor photographer for these fish.
Yeah, and I did a lecture in Denver at the Denver Fly Show back in January, and one of the things I talked about was, let's like take it back to fly fishing and trout. One of the things I said was, I'm the one asking for the photo. I'm the one who's saying I want a picture of this. So because of that, then the fish's health is now my responsibility. That's the way I look at it. So if I am asking someone to lift a trout out of the water for a photo, I better damn well be ready and able to get that image, because now I'm putting that fish's life at risk. And that's what it comes back to saying about, there's some fish that are more hardy. So bass, walleye, pike, there's some fish that are just, I mean, they just will last a really long time. So you can be a lot more aware of how you're using them, how long you can keep them. We usually have like the wells we can put them in and pump oxygen through them. And in the bass world, they have this like nitro juice they pour in there, and I have no idea what's in it, but so I'm the one who's putting the fish at risk. So when it comes to photographing trout fishing, I have to be very cognizant of that. So I want to give it the best possible chance. And because of that, I have kind of like, I try to keep a certain protocol when I'm photographing fly fishing, and it's trout fishing specifically. If I am in the same boat as you and you hook into a big one, let's get it in the net. Let's get our guide to pull the boat over to the side. Let's make sure it's safe. Make sure we can get out of the boat. I want to get my angler out of the boat. I want to get them to kneel down close to the water or kneel by the water. Let's just drop. There's a way you can actually take your net and get it right through the backside of your leg, kind of through your legs and just under your knee. That way you can actually hold your net just by holding it with your knee. And then I get the angler. I say, okay, this is what we're going to do. You're going to lift the fish at a 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle or straight on, and then you're going to put them back in the water. And then I talk them through the process. I say, okay, lift the fish, put the fish down. Okay, this time tilt the head a little bit more towards me, lift the fish, put the fish down. So you need to like be the quarterback of the photo shoot. And that is the best thing. If I can get those photos done within, 30 seconds to 45 seconds at the most, and we continually have that fish in the water. Best practice, obviously, with trout is to never lift the fish out of the water. But if you are requiring it, some companies, I need to have a reel that is close to a fish, and they need it, specific. So because of that, I want to give it the best chance possible. So I try to be cognizant of that, be the quarterback, tell people really what you want, and think about what images you want to take before you take them.
First off, you're a pioneer for for the fly fishing for women, for photography. And it seems like you're really good about sharing that knowledge. If people are wanting to get in touch with you and learn more about your profession, or maybe just want to see what you do and your work and maybe even purchase some of your items, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so actually, just a couple things. So I actually am running my very first outdoor content creator workshop for women this year,
Okay.
and it's based on the sports fishing industry. We have two full workshops. They'll be launching. They were supposed to happen in May, but now they'll be happening in September. But next year, 2021, I'll be doing it again. So I am booked up for this one. It's in Venice, Louisiana, at my friends at Journey South Outfitters, and I'm taking out two groups of 4 women in each group, and we're going to do 2 days on the water learning how to shoot editorial, everything from like software file handling all the way to just shooting stills and imagery. And so next year, definitely keep an eye out for it. And I don't want to exclude guys, because the majority of the people who follow me on Instagram, or the majority of the questions I field, are generally from men who want to know. So I would like to do something that's co-ed, maybe
Yes.
in Montana or Idaho next year, a little closer to home too, like a couple workshops. And so basically the best way to follow me and the most up to date is my Instagram. It's my last name, Haydahl, Haydahl photo. And I'm the only Jessica Haydahl out there. So if you even get close to my name, usually you'll find me. I unfortunately don't take the time to update my website very often. And but Facebook, I do have Jessica Haydahl Photography Facebook page as well. But again, it's everything's linked through Instagram, and Instagram just reposts on my Facebook. So and then I do try to put out some photo tips on my YouTube channel. I have like no followers, but that's okay. But I kind of just link to it, and I do a whole bunch of, I have some tips up on like taking gear out, what I take with me on the river to go fly fishing, and photographing fly fishing photography. And I have some fun tips for dropping lures in the water. And again, that's just under my name, Jessica Haydahl. So, various avenues that you can kind of reach me at. And I always love questions. The only thing I ask is that if you are interested in buying a camera, please just don't email me and say, what camera should I buy? Because I have no idea what camera you should buy. There's so many cameras on the market. But if you send me a message and say, hey, Jess, I love to photograph this. This is what I want to do. I want to shoot kind of with a longer lens because I want to be able to be further away from what I'm shooting. This is the amount of money I have. Do you think you might have a brand in mind? Then it's easier for me to be like, yeah, maybe this one, and then give you some ideas of maybe what you should then go and research. But a lot of people just ask me like, what camera should I buy? Or what next? My favorite is, what's the next lens I should buy? And I'm like, I have no idea. I own 20 lenses. Like, I have no idea what next lens you should buy. So,
So be
again, I try to
specific
be as,
if you're going to send some emails.
yeah, I try to be as polite back about it, but sometimes I get a little cheeky, I think.
Jessica, I appreciate you coming on the February Room today with me.
Thanks so much, and I really appreciate the time, and awesome to talk with you as well.
For the inside scoop on the fly patterns we've discussed with our guest, check our blog for Flies of the February Room. If you would like to enter the February Room, shoot us an email at info@cdfishing.us. Also, remember to subscribe, share, and if we've earned it, give us those 5 stars. Thanks for dropping by, and remember to go fishing.